Hello, Internet! I'm Melly the Purple Ardoofus, and welcome to Buddy Reads, where I read a small selection of a book and review it for you. Today we are covering chapters 114 through 120 of The Wise Man's Fear by Patrick Rothfuss. I hope you've read up to that point yourself, because I did not want to ruin anything for you. This section has Kavoth sitting down with his new teacher, Vachette. He sits down with her, and the first thing that he asks about the Chandrian. Of course, he asks about the Chandrian, because more than anything, he wants to know about the Chandrian. And you know what? I kind of do too. Patrick Rothfuss has been dropping enough hints that if we don't have like a massive Chandrian section by the end of this book, like the next book is going to be nothing but Chandrian, which I would be okay with, actually. He asks Vachette about the Chandrian, and she says, "Do you really want to ask me about the Chandrian? You don't want to ask me about anything else? How is that going to help your training?" And eventually Kavoth gets the idea that she just doesn't want to answer the question about the Chandrian, so he stops asking. Then Vachette explains to Kavoth that he is kind of being primed for a big test, a giant test, to see if he is ready to be one of the Lethani. And she says, "I have to get you to a level where I feel comfortable knowing that you will do well before you can take this test. And that is what I'm trying to do with you." And Kavoth is like, "Oh, okay." And she says, "Now, tomorrow we have to go see Shemam, the old woman that you met when you first got to this city, because she is going to talk with you about some things." And Kavoth is like, "Oh, awesome." So he goes to talk with her. She asks, "Has Tempe taught you any of our tales, of our fables?" And Kavoth says, "No." And she says, "That's good. That's good. He shouldn't have taught you that. But I will. I will do it right now. I will teach you the most famous tale that we know, the 90 and 9 tale." The 90 and 9 tales are not actually explicitly told in this fable. They're basically 99 tales that this guy told a opponent of his, and then he's like, "I have one other tale," and before he tells it, he dies. And I wish I had been more invested in that fable, because by the time they were done telling it, Vachette was crying. So it was a very powerful tale to her, and I wish it had struck me the same way that it had struck her. Kavoth then asks about his punishment. If any of this doesn't go well, what will happen to him? And Vachette says, "Well, some people are killed. It wouldn't be proper to imprison you. We could just steal your tongue. We could lop off your hands. The most important thing is we have to make sure that you cannot pass on the secrets that you have learned from Tempe to anyone else." Kavoth is like, "Oh, okay." And Vachette's like, "Don't worry about it though, you're doing fine. That won't happen." And so Kavoth feels pretty good. And he's walking around town, he notices this naked couple in the bushes, and they're looking at him strangely. And then he notices it's because he was humming. And if you remember what I said about musicians, they frown upon music, and music that you can hear out in public. And it embarrasses him. And he runs home, and he's like, "I just want to be back at the university with my friends," and I just, and he like hides under the covers, and he's hugging himself, and he's like, "I want to be home where I can sing." He wakes up the next day, and he is thinking about all of this, and he's like, "I have to do right by Tempe. I have to do right by my friend, and I have to prove myself worthy of being a Lethani." And he goes back to train with Vachette. And before he goes back, he starts describing the town and how he realizes that it's just like any other town, and I'm like, okay, moving on with this part. But he gets there, and Vachette describes the town too. She's kind of laughing at him and at all the things that he noticed as he was going to her place. And she's like, "What, did you think we were just bums who were living paycheck to paycheck? No, we're thriving here. We just know how to use the land better than anyone else. And this is land that no one else wanted, but we did." Vachette takes him to go watch fights, and it's like this day full of tournaments. And it starts with the smaller, less advanced people, and it just slowly climbs to the more advanced people. And the main event for him is to watch Shemam fight. And he watches her fight, and he watches her lose. And he's like, "Wait, is she still the leader? She just lost." And Vichette's like, you fool. Do you really think that we judge our leadership on who wins and who loses? No, we judge it on the mind. She may have lost, but she's still got a stronger mind than the person who fought her. And Kvothe is like, oh, okay. And after he watches the fight, he turns to Vichette and he says, I really want to find someone at my level that I can fight with. Because I know when I land a blow on you, it's because you let me land a blow. It's not as fulfilling to me. Could you please find someone around town that I can fight at my level? She reluctantly agrees. Then they do more training, and as they are doing training, Kvothe becomes aroused. And Vichette's like, do you need to take care of that, or do I need to take care of that for you? And he says, what? And she says, that. And he's like, oh, I don't know how to, She's like, would you like to have sex with me? He's like, oh, you are very attractive, but, I do not, what? We can go to that hovel over there. It's very soft, and we can have sex. And then after we have sex, we can get back to doing what we were intended to do, and we can train. I do not, yep, sure. And they have sex, and then they train, and Kvothe is kind of disturbed by the fact that Vichette has no feelings for him after they have sex. There's no awkwardness that there would be had they had sex in his culture. Kvothe then talks about bathhouses. Apparently he visited one and was disturbed by all the nudity, which I was like, why? You're in a bathhouse? And he's like, I started to go in the mornings and in the evenings when there was less traffic. And I can understand that, but I mean, you're in a bathhouse, what do you expect? And then he goes to train with Vichette some more. He meets her under the shade of this tree, and she has someone for him to fight. And so he's all excited, noticing that this person is short. But noticing that this person is also wearing the same color of hat that Sheenan wore. And so he's like questioning who this person is up until he walks up to her, and then he finds out that it's a 10-year-old girl. And he feels insulted, but he fights it back. He fights the 10-year-old girl and does his best not to strike her. He loses, because while he's concentrating on not hurting her, she is concentrating on winning. It's a perfect way that Eladin had tried to teach him at the university. He just gets in the way of himself too much, and he can't accomplish what he wants to accomplish because he is so in his own way. He is trying to do something when he should be just doing the other thing. He sits down with Vichette and she starts talking to him about the point of all of this training, the point of being Lithani, the point of learning this fighting technique. And he is like, oh, okay, I get it. The point is not to fight or to look for a fight, but to be able to defend yourself in case you are in a fight, sort of thing. And he's like, oh, that makes sense. And then he starts talking with the 10-year-old girl, I believe her name was Sedin. And Sedin starts playing with the sword tree, and I don't think I've discussed the sword tree yet. But the sword tree is this giant, ancient tree that the people have hung swords from. The leaves can cut you like knives, and this girl is just kind of running through the leaves, touching the trunk and running back. Just like, hee 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 hee, hee hee hee. Kvothe just watches her do it like 4 or 5 times, and then Vichette sees her do it, and she's like, you stop that right now! Well, she yells at her, but in the Lithani ways, where it's like not loud, but you can tell from the hand movements that it's like, no! Bad! You were awful! That sort of thing. Vichette then feels that Kvothe's language is good enough that he needs to go around town and start meeting with people and start discussing things, stretching his language. And he meets this guy who he affectionately calls Two Fingers because he only has 2 fingers on his right hand. Two Fingers is explaining to him how lucky he is that he only lost 3 fingers and not the whole hand. At least he can still talk, at least he can still do things, he can still cook, he can still make a living, but his brashness got in the way, and that's how he hurt himself. Kvothe is like, this is great. Kvothe then goes to fight with Sedin and then train with Vichette. And Sedin decides to land a blow at his crotch, and he is in pain for a long, long time. Vichette's like, well, we should train you while you're injured. See how you fight when you're injured. And he's like, okay, and he stands up and he picks up his sword. And she's like, no, just hands. And he's like, come on, I don't know the sword well enough. I need to practice the sword. And she's like, why do you need to practice the sword? And he's like, because what if I want to use the sword? She's like, why would you need to use your sword? And he's like, because I could use the sword better than I could use my hands. And she's like, no, you can use your hands better than you can use your sword. And this escalates. She keeps on asking these trapping questions where Kvothe is just giving the wrong answer, and it's just making her angrier and angrier and angrier every time answers the question wrong. And she starts to think that Kvothe is like, he's not there to learn Lithani, he's there to learn how to kill with a sword. She beats the ever-loving crap out of him for it. She even raises her voice, which is very different for Lithani people to do. She raises her voice while she's like beating the crap out of him, going, can you use your sword now? That sort of stuff. The next day, Kvothe wakes up and his face is just bruised and swollen and red. And he's walking around and he goes to sit down to have dinner. And the short woman that fought Shannon, her name is Pinth. Pinth sits down and she says, can I speak to you in your language? And he says, of course. They have a very pleasant meal. And Pinth says, you know, all these bruises, they weren't to hurt you. They were to mark you. They were to show everyone how disrespectful you were. And Kvothe is like, oh, I get it. During this conversation, there seems to be a bond forming between the two of them as Pinth is like, will you please write me a poem in my language? And Kvothe is like, it will be awful. And she's like, I would love that. He's like, okay. And they both write a poem for each other. And it's a very sweet moment. And then Kvothe goes to train with Vachette some more. And Vachette is sitting at her place and her face is just drained of all feeling. Even more than normally for Lithani. And he goes up to her, starts to apologize, and she's like, nope, I don't want to hear it. Your words are false. Your face is false. You have shown me that I might be training the wrong person, and I need to think about that. I need to think about that long and hard. So I'm going to think about that tonight, all night. And I will know if I want to train you more tomorrow. But what you should do tonight is you should get ready, get your affairs together, because you might be facing punishment tomorrow. If I don't believe that I should be training you anymore. And then she kind of just sends him off. And so Kvothe walks back to his place, and he's like, I am just so tired of this place. I'm just so tired of being treated like this. I'm just so tired of being beaten and then told that I'm not good enough. I'm just so tired, and I want to be with my friends, Will and Sim, Denna and Debbie and Fella. I want to be with them all. I just want to be home right now. I am so tired. And he goes around town and he starts visiting with some of the people that he met, which wasn't many. And he collects some things. With all of these dark thoughts in his head, he starts creating a voodoo doll out of candle wax. That's pretty much where our section ends today. And it's just kind of like, okay, this took a really dark turn very quickly. But if he runs, what happens to Tempe? If he does something awful with that, voodoo doll thing, what happens to Tempe? He's not thinking about Tempe right now. Oh, see, everyone else is probably worried about Kvothe and all of his dark feelings, and I'm just like, what about Tempe? I like him. I just hope Tempe comes out okay. If you like what I'm doing, go ahead and click the subscribe button. If you like this video specifically, go ahead and click the like button. And go ahead and leave a comment letting me know the character you would hate to have be put in mortal peril. Because for right now, it's Tempe for me. I've been Elliot the Purple Air Doofus. This has been Buddy Reads, reminding you to watch up Jam Radius. And I will see you all in the next section of The Wise Man's Fear by Patrick Rothfuss. Toodles!